Starting now, Equity Mates, with thanks to our mates at Spaceship.
Welcome to another episode of Equity Mates. It is the last one for the Equity Mates week here at AusBiz. And as always, we're closing out with some headline stories. I'm joined by my equity buddy Ren. How are you going?
I'm very good, Bryce. Excited for this episode.
Yep.
Excited for the end of our week,
Yes.
not the working week.
Yes.
But you will be on the golf course tomorrow.
I would love to be on the golf course tomorrow, but unfortunately that won't be happening. Too much to do here at Equity Mates. So anyway, let's kick on with it. I'm just trying to find my notes for the episode. But actually, we've been plugging this one all week because we're pretty excited about it.
We're just excited about the title, to be honest.
Well, yeah, do you want to let everyone know what the title is?
Yeah, sure. So today we're going to be talking about why the hottest commodity in 2021 isn't NFTs, it's dead trees.
And that's a wrap.
No, look, the price of lumber has gone crazy. And this will be focused on North America, but it's a global phenomenon. And so we're going to be talking about why.
So wood has gone through the roof.
Wood has gone through the roof.
Price of wood.
Wood, yeah.
I actually saw on Twitter the other day a comparison of all some of the major assets that you can invest in 2021. You've got your big hitters like stocks, you've got housing, you've got bonds, and lumber was the best performing commodity. I think ex Bitcoin.
Yeah, Bitcoin's up about
Ex-Bitcoin.
500% in the last year. That could be wrong, but lumber's up about 300%.
Yeah,
A bit over 300%.
It's had a pretty crazy start to 2021, but let's get stuck into it, Ren. As you said, back in 2020, the start of May, you could buy lumber. Now, lumber is sold in 1,000 feet.
1,000 board feet.
1,000 board feet. And the price of 1,000 board feet was $336.80. It's now trading at a hefty $1,376.50. So you can imagine if you're someone who's about to build a house, you would have wished you would have done it in 2020.
Yes, yeah. Well, and that's the thing. Like, the average price of a US house has gone up $36,000 because of the increased price of lumber.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. 15,000 board feet to build your average house in America. So
I'm going to take your word for it.
Yeah, yes, we've read the same article, so so it was in there. But look, it's not just as you said, it's not just lumber that is hitting all-time highs. There are a number of other commodities doing well.
So wheat has hit a 6-year high earlier this year. Corn hit a 7-year high. Copper has hit a decade high. Iron ore is chasing a 10-year high. A bunch of others. Lithium is running.
Yeah.
Commodities are running, which is quite interesting. If you want more on just the general commodity run that we're seeing, is it a commodity super cycle? Is it commodity super hype? What's really going on? Comedian vs. Economist, a podcast from Equity Mates, broke it all down with our resident economist, ex-RBA economist Thomas, and his comedian brother Adam. So go check that out, Comedian vs. Economist. We're not going to talk about all the commodities. We're just going to talk about lumber here, because there's both demand side and supply side reasons why this price has run, and I think it's quite interesting. And as is going to become more and more, I guess, a factor these days, climate change plays a role.
It's pretty interesting stuff. But let's start on the demand side. What is driving this price increase in lumber, particularly over in the United States? We're talking about the lumber that is grown and harvested, I guess, in Canada, the largest exporter of lumber to the United States. And this is where we're starting to see an increase in demand being driven primarily from an incredibly hot property market over in the United States. And that is coming from you and I, Ren, millennials, hitting that age where
Yes.
we're starting to think about buying houses, and there's obviously a lot of demand over there for new houses and for I guess building property, and a lot of that is wood.
Yeah, like the millennial bulge, I guess, in the demographic pyramid has stretched a number of things over time. In the 90s, the US school system was stretched by this millennial bulge moving through it. Then the inner city apartment market in the 2010s. And now millennials are in that prime family formation and home buying age.
Yeah.
And the US property market is hot. Obviously, that's not the only reason, people feel they can move out of places like California because working from home is more of a thing. So they're really, the property market across the US is hot. One thing I'm going to say is on TikTok and Twitter, the amount of Americans complaining about a hot property market, it's like, move to Australia. We've been living with that for like 20 years.
I don't remember a cool property market.
But the prices are really running. So the first demand side factor is property market in the US. And an interesting thing is the amount of new homes being built as well. That is really driving demand for lumber. So that's number one. Number two is related. It's the renovation market is incredibly hot at the moment. Two reasons. First of all, during COVID, it was harder for people to move, but people wanted more space. They were working from home. And so there was a lot of extensions being put on houses, a lot of renovations happening. So the first reason is COVID related. But the renovation market is also hot because if the property market's hot, it's expensive to move. And so people are opting to renovate their existing house rather than upsize.
Yeah.
So the demand side factors that are driving the price of lumber up, the property market and the renovation market both just driving incredible demand for this commodity.
So we all know the basics of economics. You learn it in year 11, and that is all about demand and supply. So we can't have a conversation about the rise in price without talking about the supply. If there was no issue with supply and these demand factors were there, fantastic, the world moves on. However, the real issue is on the supply side, and as we spoke about, there are a number of factors to consider here when it comes to the beautiful wood up in Canada. The first is increased tariffs on the hard stuff.
Yeah, well, as any international commodity that has been facing these trade tensions, I guess, tariffs increase the price, and we've seen some tariffs, not a whole lot, but some tariffs on lumber. So that's number one. Number two is around the capacity at sawmills. So during COVID, a lot of capacity was taken offline. Like across the economy, a lot of different businesses shut down to save costs. They expected a demand side shock around how much people would be buying, and so they scaled back accordingly. And that reduced capacities at sawmills has created a supply constraint, I guess a bottleneck, if you will.
Well, yeah, they haven't been able to re-engage as quickly as the economy has demanded it. So they haven't been able to set up shop fast enough. It's like, guys, come on.
Yeah.
Turn on a few more saws.
I don't think it's that simple.
Get going.
So they're the first two supply side factors. The next two, this is where climate change comes into the conversation. And climate change is more an exacerbating factor. So if we talk about the factors first, turns out there's been an outbreak of a bark-eating beetle in Canada that they just can't get rid of.
Devastating.
Yeah. A lot of forest. And then the second factor is we've seen historic wildfire seasons across the world. And that obviously is devastating to trees.
Yeah.
So they're the two factors. And then climate change really comes into play because as the climate gets hotter, that normally what happened with the beetle population is a lot of them died in the Canadian winter, but less of them are dying now because the winter isn't as cold. And so the beetles are surviving and thriving, which isn't good for lumber. No. And then exacerbated on top of that is that trees, I guess to defend against the beetles, excrete some substance which is then flammable. Incredibly flammable.
Yeah.
And so, these forests are getting hotter because of climate change. They're excreting this thing to fight against the beetles that is flammable, and so the fires are then getting even worse. And so there's a supply, that's affecting the supply of timber and lumber.
And it's a pretty significant impact that both of these factors have had on the plantations up in Canada. And if you think about a commodity like wood, and I guess you plant the tree, and I was reading that it takes between 40 and 60 years for these plantations to be at their, I guess, ripe stage. After 15, sure, you can take a tree, but it's only going to be 2 meters tall. Like, you're not going to have those huge bits of wood that are, I guess, incredibly valuable. So you're talking about a commodity here that takes an incredibly long time to get to its end state of production, yet is now experiencing some really significant supply side damage. So if you think about the economic impact of that and what it's going to have on prices, you might be able to start forecasting, well, this might not be the only time we see an all-time high for wood.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think in that article it said 40 to 60 years in Canada, but you could grow the same tree in 15 years in Florida, just because the conditions were different.
Jeez, why they
fact check me
move
on
over
that,
move over retirees?
Yeah, plant some
Start
trees.
getting some tree plantations down there.
So I the way that all commodities play out is at some point the price gets high enough that other people move into the market, they increase supply, and then price comes down accordingly. But for Canada, it could be incredibly devastating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's pretty interesting. I just like this whole concept, around macroeconomics. And you think about, we're talking about lumber here, and it's driven by the hot property market. And then you can kind of go back a step. Why are we seeing a hot property market? Well, we're getting driven by low interest rates. And then if you go the other way, what's a hot lumber market going to do to those companies that sell all of this lumber if you want to invest there? So it's just this huge, big circle of interconnected moving parts that is incredibly interesting. Yeah.
And I think, often, your uncle, after a couple of beers at Christmas or something, will say, I don't believe in climate change, or climate change doesn't affect me. This is an example that we're going to see more and more throughout the economy in the coming years, in the coming decades, where these second and third order effects do affect everyone. The price of lumber is up if you go to Bunnings, or if you're in America and you go to Home Depot, that price will be up if you want to buy it. But more importantly, it's another factor that is adding to the cost of property.
Yeah. Is this going in the CPI, I wonder? It's a good question.
I don't think
Probably
so.
not. But anyway, Ren, we've got a couple of minutes left, and there's a bit of a fun one we thought we'd finish the week with, and that is around UFOs and what the American government have now, I guess, publicly declared.
Yeah. This is not to do with investing, so if you can shut it off. But this was a bit of fun that we came across, and for me, there's an interesting dynamic between entrepreneurs, academics, and the US government here. And really, the headline is, the US government are leaning heavily into UFOs. So the US military have acknowledged that Navy pilots have seen, they don't call them UFOs, they call them UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomenon. You can trust the military to have an acronym that is different. So they've acknowledged that Navy pilots have seen objects flying in US airspace using advanced technology they can't identify. They've also acknowledged that they have a secret UFO tracking program, and this was actually first...
Can't be that secret.
Well, this was first reported by the New York Times and the Washington Post in 2017, but they've acknowledged it now.
Yeah, okay.
At the same time, several former high-ranking government officials, including 2 former CIA directors and the former Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid, have come out and said that the government should be looking more closely at UFOs. And current Florida Senator Marco Rubio has given a committee until June to produce a report on UFOs that's going to be public, unclassified. So there's all this, government interest in UFOs, and that's not going anywhere.
No.
But at the same time, normally you think academics and entrepreneurs are the ones that are willing to test out their ideas and, be a little bit wild with what they're researching and what they're studying. But some of the more, notable thinkers in this space, not having a bar of it.
Yeah.
Elon Musk on Joe Rogan's podcast a while ago said I think I would know if aliens existed, as he dismissed it. Neil deGrasse Tyson has come out and said, I won't believe aliens exist until they invite me for dinner.
Wow.
And for me, it's just like, this is one weird situation where the US military and the US government is being more open about something than the likes of Elon Musk, which you wouldn't pick.
You wouldn't pick it. You love to see it, though.
You do love to see it.
Well, look, a fun one there to end on. If you would like more information on what we've spoken about, or to keep abreast of some of the more interesting articles that we're sending out each week, sign up to our Thought Starters email that goes out every Monday. That's at equitymates.com/email. Otherwise, you can check out our website, equitymates.com. Send us a message at contact@equitymates.com. But that is the end of another episode. We'll be back next week, Ren, for another week of Equity Mates.
Can't wait.
Equity Mates, with thanks to our mates at Spaceship.